Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of The Fundamentalists. My name is Elliott Morgan, and I'm coming at you from a different continent than my podcasting partner, Peter Rollins. I'm coming at you on a beautiful Monday morning here in Los Angeles, California. I'm overlooking a beautiful, overcast, gray, cloudy, morose, kind of sad landscape, and it's absolutely beautiful. Whereas Peter Rollins is coming at you live from a beautiful, I'm assuming sunny and cheery evening in Belfast, Ireland.
Yeah, that's weird that you've
Is that
got a
correct?
gloomy landscape and I have a very beautiful sunny landscape. But yes, beautiful here. Like
Is
sun's
that
out,
weird?
clouds are gone, stunning.
Really?
Yeah, really, really
Is it?
nice. Yeah, I mean, it has been
Oh, that's
raining a
very
little bit
cool.
as well, but mostly very beautiful.
Well, that's wonderful. We are doing this remotely, and we are using a service called Squadcast right now for the first time because I thought it seemed kind of cool. But we don't know exactly how this is going to go. It should go very smoothly. You should get video and audio. We have our lovely, beautiful Cam who's going to try to take this and make it better. But if there's any popping or anything, we apologize. And it's hard to say that sentence without potentially popping. See, more of it's happening right now.
Yeah.
But it should be very fun. Pete, how is Belfast? Are you having fun? I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you, man. Can't wait to get back and hang out. But it's lovely to be home. Always love coming back. It's been a long time, so it's good hanging out and doing quarantine at the moment, but I'll be free very soon.
Nice. Would you like to plug what you're in Belfast for?
Oh yeah. So this week, this Friday night, it kicks off my online festival. 3 nights, music, philosophy, poetry, and all of that. All you can either watch live or you can dip in and out of and watch later. So that kicks off a little bar called the Sunflower. That's literally 2 minutes walk from where I'm staying, and it's got this cool cage on the front of it from the Troubles. Whenever you had to get buzzed in, make sure you didn't have guns. And yeah, so we'll be doing everything from there.
And people can get information at peterrollins.com. Is that what
Dot
the
com. That's it. PeterRollins.com. It's
all
like
right.
$55. That gets you 9 hours of stuff. And I say it's local musicians, artists, and I'll be doing some philosophy about the death of God. So that's and the
That's
chaosmos.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, I
What are
can't
you
wait.
doing? Have you got anything to plug? What are
Well,
you,
y- it's funny you bring that up, Pete. Thank you so much. If folks want to go to elliottmorgan.com/tour, I will next month be in Spokane, Washington, at the Spokane Comedy Club, as well as Tacoma. And in July, mid-July, 14th, 15th, I will be in Tampa, as well as Orlando. And then in August, I will be in Ohio, Columbus, and Liberty Township. I do not have choices on where these places are. I just go where I'm being beckoned. But if you are in any of those areas, I think you should come hang out because it's going to be very fun, and I'm excited about the stuff that I'm working on and figuring it out. And I'm brainstorming things and getting feedback from my partner about you know what is actually funny and where I should play to my strengths. And she's like, you should just not do the comedy part and just do the stuff you want to do. And I was like, I get it. That's what Pete says too. So I agree. It'll be very funny and very silly, but I'm excited to create a whole thing. I'm going to try to structure it a little differently than what's normal. I usually it's like doing the stand up thing is like just bit after bit, and then I have several bits, but I like to make a whole thing. I want to make a whole
Mm.
nice message that's like concert, like uh, concise and is a little bit more meaningful or meaningless, depending on how you look at it. And so I'm pumped about it, and that's the ridiculous universe idea that I'm stoked about. So it'll be very fun. But if you'd like to get tickets, you can go to elliottmorgan.com/tour or peterrollins.com if you want to join Pete. There's all sorts of fun things. We also have patreon.com/the Fundamentalist, which is allowing us to use Squadcast as well as edit this, sound edit this. So thank you to everybody who signed up over there. And I'm excited to start getting to know everyone. It's a nice little group forming, but they don't
We
know each
have
other yet. I
a
want to do a little mixer.
yeah, we have an apology to make, but about the
Yeah,
Patreon. Because yeah,
I
we
know.
promised that we had this episode called Money and UFOs, but
Yeah.
we had to format a SD card, and we formatted the
Bye bye.
card with the audio of that, so that is forever gone. But
Yep.
we're going to create
It
a new
is.
one. We're going to create a different one.
Yeah, I still love the idea of doing an episode that's just a half money and half aliens. I did
Yeah.
watch before we dive into this particular topic, which this week we're talking about impossible desire or forbidden desire. Is that what it is?
Yeah, jouissance, the French term, enjoyment.
Jouissance.
Jouissance. Yeah.
I can't wait. Before we get into that, yeah, I have to say, Pete, I did watch the 60 Minutes last night that I was very excited about um, regarding UFOs slash UAPs, and there was
Oh,
absolutely no new information. But I will keep you updated for when we make
thank
first
you.
contact.
Yes.
I'm very excited about it. No one else
Yeah, let me
cares, but
know.
I'm super pumped.
You love
All
it.
right,
You love
well,
the UFOs.
I've just
Sorry, there's a
gotten so yeah, it's really little delay. Is that what you're saying?
little bit of delay. Yeah, but that's fine. People will
Yeah.
forgive us. We're in different sides of the world. In the old days, this would have been impossible. So, hey.
Yep, it's this is as good as it gets, and I'm just impressed that we're doing it, and we will recreate an episode on more stupid things for the Patreon specifically. And if you would like to join, you can. Now, Pete, let's dive into this. You got all sorts of terms that you sent me to look up, and I was setting this up and did not get a chance to. I did look up something that led me to the Encyclopedia of Psychoanalysis, and was talking about the word transgression, and that's about as far as I got. It was very interesting, but I got confused very quickly.
Oh, very good. Yes, well, jouissance and transgression are very interlinked. So, yeah, we are going to talk about that. Yeah, I suggested the topic for today. I was thinking about desire, enjoyment, and a particular type of desire, not the desire for something that is of value, that has use, that we get something out of, but the kind of desire for things that have no utility, the things that are actually can be painful for us. Um, you could say that, for example, sex has a utility in terms of having kids, but there's also this dimension of it, a human dimension where you have sex precisely because it has no utilitarian value, and that's enjoyment, that's jouissance. So I thought maybe I would talk a little bit about this notion in psychoanalysis and then see where it went. Will I just jump ahead because of the delay? Maybe I should talk for a few minutes. Cool.
I think I know.
Oh yeah,
I think people need to hear it.
great. um, so yeah, the term jouissance is used in psychoanalysis. It's a French term, and they don't translate it usually, but it basically means enjoyment. Uh, but it means a particular type of enjoyment, the type of enjoyment that is often painful, often destructive. It's the stuff that we often do that not only is not good for us, but can sometimes be bad for us. And I thought I would very quickly mention three types of jouissance, and then see where we go. Um, the first type of jouissance is the jouissance of wholeness, the jouissance of the desire to meet someone who completes us, the desire, whatever. It's kind of primitive love in a way when you meet somebody and you feel that they complete you or that they reflect something of your own inner essence and the two become one. And that's a very powerful experience. So that's the jouissance of wholeness and completeness. But it always feels, it never fully works. It always is exciting at the time, but then it ends up collapsing. Because if you go with the Lacanian notion that, there is no person who can complete us because we're all divided, then ultimately it's always going to fall apart in some sort of way. Uh, and then there is the jouissance of transgression. And this is the excessive pleasure you get from standing up against something, from putting yourself against your past or some political party or some group, or having an affair or doing something that's not allowed by the law, by whatever the law is culturally, where you find an enjoyment precisely by breaking prohibitions. And that's a very exciting type of jouissance. As I say, the jouissance of affairs really connects with that notion of transgression, but also political resistance, people's pleasure at defining themselves against those in power, for example. But then that's always a bit difficult as well, because when you get in power, or if you ever become the law and no longer transgress it, then all the pleasure goes, because the pleasure is precisely in not getting. Um, and then finally, I think there is the more positive jouissance, which is the jouissance of continual failure, but an enjoyable failure, where you enjoy repeating things, like, you're always trying to get better at chess or at philosophy, or trying to have new adventures, and you're always failing. You're never quite getting what you want, but you actually are able to directly enjoy that failure, that not getting. So that's like a very basic look at jouissance over three kind of forms. Um, and I'll say one more thing about it is, I don't know if you've heard of the Japanese art form called, is it Shin dogu? Shin dogu, where people make these
Mm.
inventions that they purport to solve a problem, but they're just a little bit unwieldy. So they solve a problem, but by creating more problems in the process. So they'll have like a machine that puts your glasses on. But it's much easier just to put your glasses on with your hand. But they'll have this massive contraption that you put over your body,
So
and
funny.
it's got like, yeah. And the ideal of Shindogu is that you create a contraption that has no utility. It's just slightly more annoying to use than if you didn't use it. So it's precisely this weird thing where and you're not supposed to make anything that could be sold. Like, so you can't make more than one. They're completely useless. They have no utility. And yet there's something so enjoyable about looking at them. And I think Shindogu is a type of enjoyment without pleasure. In fact, Freud called this the beyond of the pleasure principle, because pleasure is we drink to satisfy our thirst, we eat to satisfy our hunger, we do lots of things because we're lonely. But when we go beyond the pleasure principle, we get into this excessive form of enjoyment that actually results or is generated precisely by not getting. It's by the impossible. So there you go. There's a brief intro.
Uh, Excellent. That was an excellent intro. I got a few things to add. But the most important is an Instagram account that I follow called Unnecessary Inventions. Have I talked to you about this before?
No, but this is it. This is
Uh,
this is probably a version of Shindogu. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I can't say that it's exactly this, but it seems to be exactly this. Like for example, here's it's this guy who does it. He's got, let's see, 806,000 followers. He cracks me up. He uses like a 3D printer to make just incredibly stupid inventions. He has one, for example, called the sizzling scooper, which is a spoon for your ice cream, but attached to it is a lighter so that you can use the lighter to soften the ice cream before,
That's it. Yeah.
before eating it. And then, and then there's this one that sits an anytime selfie system, which is, basically a holder for it's a holder for your cell phone, but it has a mirror on it, so you can always be taking the mirror selfies that influencers love to do, you know what I'm talking about? Like, that's a mirror attached, that you carry around with you, and it's so dumb, but, I mean, the guy's a genius. It seems like that's exactly what you're talking about. It's just pure
That's
silliness
it.
that no one would ever want.
That's it.
Is
There was
it,
there was good.
is it jouissance though? If it's the desire, the first one, this desire for wholeness, is that you don't you don't really know consciously that that would be a jouissance, right? Like people don't know that. They, even if you do know it rationally, you still fall for it pretty much all the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So is it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but it becomes something you're basically saying that on an unconscious level, you are wanting people are people know unconscious, like it's aware, you're aware of it on some level. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, or but you're kind of not consciously aware of it. You're right. It's like we feel fragmented, and we feel often there's parts of ourselves that we are not connected to, and so we project that out onto others without knowing it, and then we get pleasure from encountering it. So yeah, I would say that type of jouissance of wholeness, of meeting somebody who
Mhm.
completes you. Um, it's a very primal type of pleasure.
Yeah, I guess all of these all these would be somewhat unconscious. I was
Mhm,
thinking about the second one, um desire for transgression, and
mhm,
I was reading something. I don't know if it was related to school or what, but it was talking about the political correctness cancel culture type of thing, and it seems like there is on both ends a borderline erotic motivation to a lot of the stuff that goes on, like especially from what I can tell of a lot of the provocateurs on the right or whatever side that are like anti PC or that's their whole brand. That's all that they and they freak out about it and they purposefully do things and say things that are like considered to be offensive or considered to be transgressing the social norms that you're supposed to be speaking in. And it's
Mhm.
like they get an audience for that, but it also feels just like a really strange sexual thing. Like they really get something out of this that's creepy and like obsessive, like they do protest too much kind of deal. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
thinking of like the Steven Crowders and those who get up and they just say the craziest things where it's like you're not even making a point, you're just trying to poke and poke and poke, and that seems like a even poking is like a Freudian,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
erotic.
absolutely, and I see it on all sides. But both, and the right and the left have tried to, in different ways, define themselves as outsiders. So either the resistance or against the deep state, or against the kind of the elites, or So there's both sides I've seen in the last few years. There's been a big set, as you say, like almost libidinal, sexual desire to paint yourself as the outsider, and to kind of like define yourself against some big other that you are fighting against and transgressing against. And so, yeah, I think that we very much see that today in the political realm on kind of both sides. Sometimes it was funny whenever the conservatives, especially Trump, got into power, because that was, some people say the person who was most surprised that Trump won was Trump, and that you're no longer the transgressor, you're now the one in power. So you have to then have someone you're transgressing at. So even if you're the most powerful person potentially in the world, you then have to have the deep state. And the deep state is even more powerful. So you have to define yourself as an outsider. And then the idea of the resistance, um, which kind of sometimes you could see got a real pleasure from defining themselves against Trump. So even now, when Trump's gone, I still see these liberal and neoliberal comedians kind of referencing him all the time, as because they kind of need to kind of have this figure that they can define themselves against.
Yeah. I mean, you can just say my name. You don't have to say neoliberal comedian. I
Yes.
mean, uh, Um, yeah, I think that's. I like how too when you were talking about that one, the number two, the desire for transgression. Um, you mentioned also in addition to the cultural, you know, societal stuff, you threw in the first one you mentioned was one's past, and the desire to transgress or like fight against your past, which I think is a very
Oh yeah,
interesting version of that.
I
Like, it's
see that a
inside
lot
your
in
brain
religion.
and you're
Yeah. A lot of you probably see this with a lot of people who were formerly religious and then spend all their time on Twitter attacking the religion that they were part of. And you kind of get a feeling that they're getting an enjoyment from transgressing against their own past, you know? So, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's great, and it's never ending, and it's a fun thing. And then the third one, desire for, failure, I mean, that one's just a fun one. That just sounds like a good
Yeah.
time. That sounds I've, which one of these do you think you're best at, Pete?
Oh, that's a good one. 'Cause, well, so the third one is potentially the most emancipatory one. That's maybe the one that has the most value attached to it. But like the second one, I've been caught up in the past, and the problem with it is, like, the example of an affair is perfect, because you get so many people who are having affairs who, the moment that the it's no longer a transgression. So the moment it's found out and the two people can be together and it's allowed, is often the time whenever all the desire goes. And it can happen overnight. It can almost happen like this, as soon as it becomes not transgressive, it just becomes really boring. And so, yeah, that's a good example of how this idea of transgression kind of, it ultimately is a bit of a failure, because it has to keep generating like some sort of prohibition. But the last one that you're mentioning is the one in which you you kind of directly enjoy circling around a failure. You kind of it's called Lacan calls it the non-relation, where he says there's no sexual relationship. And what he means is there is no kind of unifying the two become one, but there is a type of non-relation, which is where you find the person who you do want to be one with. You find the person who you enjoy an antagonistic relationship with. You and to say it in a really poppy way, you find the person you like to fight with. You like to argue the
Yeah.
person who, when it's not right, you still want to be with them.
Right. Like
Yeah.
even if she doesn't think that aliens are interesting or cool, and you do think aliens are cool, like you enjoy that sort of back and forth.
Yes.
In terms of the infidelity one, it reminds me of there's a poem by the poet Rivers Cuomo of Weezer, and it's a poem called "Thank God for Girls," and there's a line in it where he says. I'm so glad I got a girl to think of, even though she isn't mine. I think about her all the day and all the night. It's enough to know that she's alive. She says I give her sweaty palms. She almost had a heart attack. The truth is, I'm just as scared. I don't know how to act. I wish that I could get to know her better, but meeting up in real life would cause the illusion to shatter.
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
it goes
And
on.
this by yeah, this is a religious notion. So religion has always been tied with the transcendental, which means connected to the impossible or to something that is outside of being, something that is not or otherwise in being. And so jouissance is a form of secular religion because we're talking about something that doesn't exist. So it's transcendental. It's something that is a type of nothing. It's a something that is nothing, or it's a nothing that is something. Like death is a nothing that affects us. So when we desire in a way of jouissance, we're kind of desiring something that is not in reality. It's not in being, and yet it has an effect. I mean, this is why a lot of naive humanism doesn't work because it doesn't have any place for non-being. For it doesn't have any place
Mhm.
for the transcendental dimension within reality itself, which is what jouissance is touching on. Because you're ultimately desiring something that's always just out of reach or impossible.
What would you say is the can you define in your own words for
Mhm.
this oral presentation that you're doing? Thank you so much. What is you're killing it? What is humanism for those who don't know, and what is, in your take, the thing? Because I think people hear that word and they don't think. I don't think about it. I hear it, and I'm like, humanism, cool. I don't like a lot of things that have isms behind them. I assume that isms are usually not the best thing. But what about humanism? First, what is it, and what about it is kind of at odds with a lot of what you're talking about here specifically?
Oh yeah, very good. Well, okay, that's a good question. So for me, the first humanist, and actually a humanist I like a lot, is Feuerbach. He's one of for me, he kind of like sums up the real move into humanism in the kind of modern European tradition. And he starts off with the idea that in order to come to know ourselves, we have to project ourselves onto something external. And then we come to know ourselves and then we bring that back. So God is a screen upon which we project
Mhm.
human essence. And this is actually a precursor of projection. I mean, this is then later on developed by the psychoanalysts because in psychoanalysis, we come to know ourselves through seeing ourselves in the mirror of our parents and our brothers and our
Mhm.
sisters. We kind of come to see who we are through others. And a lovely Jung quote is, we see our unknown face in the other. So
Lovely.
for
Yeah, I
Feuerbach,
was
yeah,
gonna
it's
say
beautiful.
I was gonna say the Jungian thing is yeah, to know what is in your shadow. You the first place and primary place to look is your projections onto other people. That's the best way to find out what about yourself is your least favorite thing that you're not thinking about.
Yes, that by the
Not that I
way,
don't know if
that
that's good.
this is the key. That's the key reason why. And it sounds weird. At first, I had somebody ask me this the other week at a party where they said, "Well, why?" Because there's some drugs happening at the party. I was like, "Well, why do drugs not do the same thing as psychoanalysis, right? Why not?" And the thing I was saying to them is, so drugs are great, maybe, and meditation's great. That's all fine. But the one thing you can't do is the weird thing is in psychoanalysis is we project onto other people. So what you need, if you really want to come to know your unconscious, sometimes is you project onto a therapist. You don't even know you're doing it. You project onto the therapist. The therapist then feels what you're projecting onto them. They start to feel like that you're treating them in a certain way, like your father or your mother, and then they feed back to you that projection. And so the only issue, and I say meditation's great, but you don't have the screen upon which to project your unconscious, which is then fed back to you. That's why, Freud said like self-analysis is impossible, because self-analysis, you don't have the person that you project onto who then helps you see what you've projected onto them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Does that
I
make sense?
kinda think that yeah, I like, a lot of the stuff that's coming out right now of, I'm sorry if I look distracted, a little pretty blue jay, just landed
Oh,
on a wall, and I'm just looking at very nice. Um,
nice.
and it's gone, just like that. It comes into my life and right out of it. But, um,
Mm.
what were we going the projection, what were we saying? There's a therapist that
Oh,
does
yeah.
the
So you need
takes
the
the thing,
therapist as a
feeds it
screen.
back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's what it I've been reading about, he's back. I've been reading about the sort of psychedelic and, psychotropic and that kinda thing of, um in a therapeutic sense, like, there's all this stuff coming out about I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but there's a lot of research being done into, like, shrooms and psilocybin and that kinda thing, and long-term microdosing and, like, doing it under a very, like, strict therapeutic, regimen and kinda what effects that's having on people, and all the results seem to be very good. But a lot
Mm,
of this stuff, like, whether it's that or meditation or, any kind of, I think, like, ritual, thing that, that shock, that crazy environment you enter that alters your thing, that shows you and unlocks all this stuff in your brain. I think
mm,
what they're saying is I don't know if this is similar to what you're saying, but that stuff is useful. However, it is not enough to actually produce any sort of long-term change in a person. You have to kinda be in some sort of a therapeutic session to continuously work through this stuff because otherwise it's just an experience, is what I believe I'm
yes.
gathering.
100%.
Cool.
If you believe that projection and transference are key technologies for accessing the unconscious, and if you believe that they're key technologies in helping you come to see the divisions and the contradictions within yourself, then yes, then you require a third. You just do. And probably drugs might help in some respect, but you still require the one that you project onto, the one that you transfer old relationships onto that person in the present. And for them to be trained to be able to work out what you're transferring onto them and what you're projecting onto them.
Yeah, I was wondering if about that, if the therapist does it unconsciously as well. I mean, there is a countertransference that happens, but the
Mhm.
therapist, they're I guess, yeah, they're both trying to mirror like, consciously trying to mirror back what there is being projected upon them. But at
Mhm.
the same time, they probably can't help do their own level of transference and whatever that looks like. And then, you know, on some level, I imagine the patient slash client picks up on that. And then it creates there's all these whirlwinds of projections going around. It's like a little
Yes.
meteorological system.
Absolutely, and that's kind of why your friends can't do analysis. So some people say, "Oh, listen, you don't need analysis if you have good enough friends." But the problem is your friends aren't their friends, so you're projecting onto them, they're projecting onto you. There's transference, there's counter transference, and that's
I,
what a friendship is. But with an analyst,
yeah,
technically, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying my friends are the reason I'm in therapy, but that's just a stupid joke. And it's gonna be hard to hit the
That's very
timing.
good. That's
Yeah.
very true. But yeah, the
You think they're
uh,
helping? They're not helping.
but yeah,
Funny.
like you wouldn't want your friend to just be a blank screen, but they technically the analyst sits there as a blank screen, and then they feel what you're doing. They feel that, oh, are you trying to make me angry with you? Like, so for I had a friend, for example, who kept forgetting to go round to see his kids. He had an arrangement on a Tuesday night to go and see his kids and read to his kids because he was, broken up with his partner and they shared the children. And he forgot three times in a row. And he was like, oh my goodness, like, what am I doing? And his ex said, do you want the kids to hate you? And as I was talking to him, we chatted about it. He was like, well, maybe it's true. Maybe I want the kids to hate me. In other words, I want the kids to feel about me the way I feel about myself. So he was denying his own self hatred. But what he was doing in denying his self hatred is he was doing things that would make his kids hate him so that he would get, through projective identification, he would get the hatred back that he was repressing within himself.
Hmm.
And so he needed a conversation with somebody to be able to show what was actually going on, because you don't know, you just, without someone who's trained to keep an eye on that stuff, it goes completely unnoticed. It's like it lives on the surface. It's the most obvious thing and yet completely invisible.
I know it's the best. It's right there the whole time.
Yeah.
It's when you see it, you can't unsee it. That would be the desire for non-relation, correct? That's that putting his kids in a position where they are mirror, like he's essentially like his partner is saying, failing as like he's failing to go hang out with his kids. He's failing to read to his kids. So he is doing that failure over, like repeating it like week after week. Would that
Yes.
be fall into that category?
That is true. That's like a repetition compulsion where you keep doing some painful activity, but you're getting some enjoyment from it. That's the key. So that's why in
Mhm.
analysis, often someone will say, what are you enjoying? What do you get out of that? So like with my friend, I could say to him, well, what are you getting out of not seeing your kids, forgetting your children? And the pleasure is the pleasure of his own self-hatred, being mirrored back to himself. There's something that's that's he's connecting with a part of himself without knowing, yeah, in that act. But that's why, again, someone like Slavoj Žižek keeps reminding us that, in a way, the Freudian unconscious is on the surface. It's not in the depth. Like there's stuff in the depths, but
Mhm.
in some respects, it's the thing that's right on the surface. It's so obvious. Whenever he
Mhm.
told me that 3 times in the row he'd forgotten his kids, and I'm like, you never forget to meet me. You never forget work appointments. Your brain is functioning properly, so we can't think that you're got some sort of Alzheimer's. So what if you actually want to forget your kids because you and then suddenly it opens it up, because of course that's like, it's totally on the surface, it's totally there for everybody to see, and yet nobody
Yeah.
notices. We're always
Yeah.
telling the truth.
Yeah, we are. And my favorite is the like, well, maybe you do want your kids to hate you, and then the immediate reaction with no time in between is just, no, of course, I don't want that. And then that's the fun tell too.
Yes,
You're like, oh yeah, you really responded real quickly to that. That's nice. Good for you. Yeah. You.
that's
Oh,
right.
sorry, I
It's
brought it up. Oh, my bad. Oh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the old thing of, I had a dream and it definitely wasn't about my mother. It's the denial right at the front which tells you what it is about. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, did you I did I will tell folks that I did we mentioned on a previous podcast that he did had a dream where I was starting a secret society without him. And so last night when I was texting him about recording this podcast, I realized he was probably asleep, and I decided to tell him that I was in fact, take his time. I hope he's resting well, but I was at a secret society with some friends that he was not invited to. I'm trying to make your dream feel more
Yes.
alive within your life. So
You're
what
trying
are
you're
what are
trying to
friends
get it.
for, you know?
You know my insecurities. You know my little, yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? A true
Well,
friend
yeah, and
uses
it
your insecurities.
yeah, yeah, I was like, "Oh, what a nice thing to wake up to in Belfast when you're stuck in quarantine," and, just a dickish message from me being like, "Hey, remember that thing that made you feel bad? I'm gonna make it the first thing you see when you wake up." But I'm having fun, you know? You're not around, so I have to do what I can.
I don't think
That's
I
my
saw that
my
message, but
opinion
did
on
you
it.
even send it? Did you send it in the end?
Let me see.
I don't think you sent it.
Hmm, I wonder if I sent it to somebody else. You know what? I did, and it came back green. So I don't know if maybe I
I didn't
said
get
you're
that.
probably
Ah,
yeah, yeah. It was Saturday night, and at 9:25, I texted, "You're probably sleeping. In that case, just know I'm at a party right now, kind of a secret society with some friends, just us allowed." And that's all I said. But you didn't get it. I
see,
was
that would screw me
worried too
up.
because you
That would.
didn't. Yeah, because also I was a little worried because your next text was, regarding the podcast, and you said, "I'd love to, but I'm out this evening. How about Monday morning your time?" And I was like, "Oh, I hope I didn't offend him," but it makes sense if you didn't see it. Okay, great.
Oh, right. No, totally, totally. Because did I tell you that
I
I
would clear
used to
that.
have dreams? I used to have dreams where the kids in the area would be playing hide and seek and they'd all just go home and I'd be running around trying to find people. So it must be this deep insecurity in me that I'm going to be left out.
Yep. It's great. I
Um,
love it. This deep, it must be just a deep insecurity that you want to be left out.
well, yes, see, there you go. It's what are you getting out of it? What enjoyment are you getting out of being the outsider? That's very interesting. I like that.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, and
Very
I was
fun.
saying
We'll
about
continue that
we
next.
should yeah, we should bring it back as well to humanism briefly. I remember we were talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
And apologies to everybody who notices the slight delay, but we're doing pretty good. But obviously, we're talking over each
Yeah.
other a tiny bit, so apologies to everybody. Um, but yeah, so I was saying like Feuerbach was the one who said God is a kind of a way of understanding what humanity is, just like people's dogs look like themselves, or you can tell what a person's ideals are by looking at their dog. You can tell what a humanities like by looking at their gods. So that's the beginning of humanism. But the issue for me with some humanist tradition is it doesn't have a place for this idea of self division. So basically, God
Mhm.
is a reflection of ourselves. But in some religious traditions, God is not a projection, God is a projectile. So the notion is that religion at its best doesn't reflect who we are, but religion can be the thing that um, uh, kind of problematizes what we are, that kind of the thing that kind of a way of a way of breaking down our ethical and wisdom traditions and getting us to think differently. So anyway, that was just But the reason why I was throwing humanism under the bus a little bit is just primarily that I think we have to have a way of dealing with the transcendental. And the transcendental is the projectile. The transcendental is a type of not at oneness of the world, a type of impossibility. Um, and we can't do away with that. When we do away with that,
You're
we
saying
lose something valuable.
in transcendental, is that the same thing as transcendent?
Yeah, so
Like
transcendental. Go ahead.
after you, yeah. I'm just trying.
Yeah,
You keep saying transcendental, and in my head, I'm thinking transcendent, but I think you mean something different. But or
yeah.
maybe it's
So
just a word thing.
no, no, no. It is different. And Kant makes a distinction between
Okay.
the transcendent, which is an object, and the transcendental, which is a dimension. So if you talk about the transcendent, you're talking about, say, God, this being that is beyond being. But if you talk about the transcendental, you're talking about a realm of reality that is not reducible to something we can speak of. So for Immanuel Kant, there's the transcendental categories. So you which is things that you can't think, but you have to presuppose in order to think. So they exist, but you can't
Yeah.
think them. They're literally the things they're the lens through which you see. You cannot see them, but without them, you cannot see anything. And they're transcendental because they're outside the realm of things that we can grasp.
Yep.
Does that make
Yep.
sense?
Yep. 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 Big fan. Big fan. Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I really liked it. Well, listen. This is what would you say is the overall what do you do with these? Do you put these in your hat as terms, that you can keep in mind? I like that. I like the idea of being able to go, why do I keep doing this? Oh, there's some kind of jouissance, there's some kind of dark pleasure I'm getting out of, a repetition of failure or or a desire for wholeness that I know on some level isn't going to work, or a desire to kind of poke. I mean, a lot of like my old stand up when I was first starting was specifically had that trollish vibe to it that was kind of like a pokey kind of like, look, I can say whatever I want, and I don't necessarily like that kind of comedy as much anymore, but it's still
Mm,
occasionally very fun. I do it more sporadically, but I like the idea of being able to think about these things in terms of those different like categories, not Kantian categories, but like what else do you do with it? Do you learn to does it help you think realize it or recognize it in your own life so that you can make better decisions, or is it just sort of, you're never going to be able to like get away from these entirely. So what do you do with it? What is the
yeah.
takeaway?
Yes. What's the takeaway? I guess for me, I mean, you could almost imagine rolling through these three types of jouissance. So, first of all, the idea in psychoanalysis is you can't do without it. A life without jouissance, without this excessive beyond the pleasure principle, without this painful pleasure, life is boring, right? So, we all need a little bit of jouissance. Um, but you could imagine almost like in a relationship, you meet somebody, and at first you think they complete me, they're everything, and they think the same. And so that's the jouissance of the imaginary. That's the jouissance of wholeness. That's a very primitive love. And that's fine. That's great. That gets you kind of into each other. And then we could imagine rolling into the jouissance of the symbolic, which is the jouissance of the transgression, where maybe what generates that is the person's going out with somebody. They're with somebody else, so you
Mm-hmm.
can't be with them. So that generates the jouissance of impossibility. But then if you're successful, you can roll into the third. And the third is where you're together. You no longer think you're going to complete each other. You no longer need some prohibition. The other person's either going out with somebody, or you have to fantasize they're going out with somebody to have jealousies or whatever. You've got beyond that, and you're able to enjoy the imperfection of your relationship. And as you say, like, you don't get rid of them all. Like, they're all working, but maybe the takeaway is you try to roll through from the first one to the third one.
Yeah.
That's going to be the most sustaining type of jouissance.
Yeah,
Although
almost
it's
like
got
a
its problems as
circular.
well.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's like a path. It's not like individual things that pop up that are independent. They overlap, and you roll from one to the other, and you have,
Mhm.
and then you die,
Yes, that's pretty much it.
or
Yep.
or the relationship dies.
Yep. Yep.
Well, lovely. I think Pete, I think this is a wonderful first podcast remote. How do you feel about it? I know that it's weird, and I again to our listeners and viewers, thank you for your patience with this. But and also please let us know what you think in the comments below, or tweet at us, or whatever. What are you thinking? How do you like it?
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it. As I mean, obviously with the delay, we haven't been able to have the back and forth as much. So I feel like we could say that I would definitely want to release this, but everybody know that we're using new technology. The Wi-Fi here is terrible. I'm going to have to figure this out. So we'll get better
Yeah.
Wi-Fi for the second one.
Yeah, you look on mine like a little potato, but I don't know if maybe it's recording it. It might look really nice with this Squadcast thing, but yeah, normally we're a little bit more zany, but it's hard to
Mhm.
do when we're also trying not to talk over each other. Well, yeah, I agree totally. I think that sounds great. Also, you could try hotspotting next time. That's what I do when I'm out here in this little shed.
Okay, I'll
It'll be
do. Well,
fun.
you know what? That's what I was doing. Annoyingly, I was hotspotting via
Oh, yeah.
BT, and it seems to be no better, no better. But yeah, no, this would be a nice, yeah, this is a nice little short one. But I do want to hear if you've got a takeaway before we go. Have you got any takeaway on this notion of jouissance and non-utilitarian
you know,
pleasure?
I think it's lovely. I think that it's the core. I really enjoyed my favorite part is we've talked about this before. It's the bread and butter a lot of our podcast episodes, but that the idea of the constant simplicity of looking at people's projections and letting it be a guiding uh, indicator of what's going on with yourself is nice. I think it also alleviates a lot of the pressure that people might feel in life about other people, and a lot of that I think it weakens the animosity people can have toward other people. If I'm particularly pissed off at someone, and they are, and then I recognize that it's probably it has to do with me, then it makes me, I think, a little nicer of a person, and I think that that's good. And I've heard from some people that I need to be nicer. Um, Mom, my mom. But, yeah, that's my favorite part, and,
Yeah,
the
and
rest just
yeah.
is a little depressing, but I
Yes.
really liked it.
Yeah, but that thing that the bit that I enjoyed exactly the same as you is this notion of when we understand that we're not atoms. So if I go and I meditate on my own, that's good and that has lots of value. But to know yourself, you have to know yourself in relation to others. And to have a therapist or someone who's trained to to see what happens when you're actually around other people, that tells us so much that we'll never find out when we're on our own, when we're atomized. So that dimension of projection and transference, that's a good reason why I'm sure people who listen to this podcast kind of wonder, why is Pete never kind of always pushing back a little bit on this notion of meditation. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that if you take the notion that human beings are interpersonal, that who I am is really a reflection of who I am in relation to my parents and my siblings, people I love, the people I hate, and and all of that's going on. And that if someone's trained to sit in a room with me, I bring all of those relationships into the room and I put them onto the other person without even realizing it. And actually, then when they feed it back, I suddenly start to see myself and go, oh my goodness, that's why I feel the way I do because of my relationship with my mother or whatever. And so, yeah, that was a fun little bit of the conversation.
I love that, and also, just as a final note, I do have my Freudian Sips mug that I'm drinking coffee out of,
Nice.
and
Nice.
and it does say when you say one thing but mean your mother, so it's a classic joke, and there he is right there, he's an adorable man. Really
Yeah.
chill dude, laid back, well, zany as we are. Alright, everybody, thank you so much for listening slash watching this podcast, we hope you enjoyed it, we're gonna keep, staying on schedule, and if you have any suggestions for topics, anything like that, thoughts on the impossible, the forbidden desires, the jouissance, let us know. And thank you. And Pete, please enjoy Belfast very much. I can't wait for you
Uh,
to get back. When do you get back?
Get back on the 4th of June. And mate, it's so good seeing you. I do miss you because you went off just before I went off. So I haven't hung out for a while. So can't wait to be doing this
I
in
know.
person in 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
We're gonna have so fun. I can't wait. All right, man. Well, thank you very much, and goodbye, everybody.